You are listening to the new man beyond the Macho Jerk and the New Age Wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Is meditation a tool to help you be more productive or an ancient practice for expanding consciousness? Is personal growth just another way to escape the discomfort and uncertainty of life? And can peace only be experienced once we've accomplished all of our goals? Today, my wife Alyson and I share another coffee date, and this time we talk about what has drawn me into decades of spiritual practice. There's the good and the not so good. So why do I keep doing it after all these years? What did you just say? You sat down?
You hit record. I'm not saying a word. You were just saying this morning,
What?
it's not public. I don't want the public to know about these things.
Are we still treating this as a date?
I've never been on a date like this before.
You've never been on a date?
With a microphone in my face. I know you got a joke. I see it on your face.
Stay away from that one.
I see it on your face.
Stay away.
Yeah, whole body reacted to that
I'm
one.
gonna stay away.
Good boy.
Stay away. I might be maturing. I think I've matured a lot.
You're maturing. I guess it's like it's all still there. Your initial thoughts and reactions are still there, but maybe you don't just blur them out anymore.
Right. What do you feel any genuine curiosity in this moment?
In this moment, do I feel any genuine curiosity?
Or genuine, like, ooh, I want to explore this? Where'd you just go?
To a private place, not a public place.
If you don't, it's fine. But
Well, it's there. There was a lingering question from yesterday that I didn't follow up on, so it might not make sense to put it in today. But I did want to know, I was asking about the arc of your spiritual development, but I started by saying you've been a meditator and I'm just curious, what got you? Why are you doing that? Why did you do that?
You say I meditate every day. I meditate most days. I don't want to give the impression that I'm impeccable with that, but I do meditate most days. But I think it's reaching to say I do it every day.
Well, we could say you do it 5 out of 7 days or 6 out of 7 days, pretty much.
So what had me start meditating?
Yeah, what had you start meditating?
I wanted to escape.
Yeah, okay. That's why I was asking, because there was sort of this thing around I always felt other, but but then there was no way, sort of hyper individual or independence.
I think there was a part of me that wanted to move in a spiritual growth, genuine spiritual growth, and I didn't realize it until later that there was a shadow side to that. Mm-hmm. So what drew me to the growth side, I think it was reading spiritual texts and seeing that meditation kept coming up as a practice, and some of the states that were described.
And is this, when you say spiritual texts, were you talking about
mainly Buddhist stuff? Okay.
So you how did you were a Florida boy, coming off?
We have books there.
I know, but the way you describe your life, you were a musician, you were touring, you were into music, you were in a media company, media production. You were coming out of college where you were, well, I guess it was a ways away from college, wasn't it? A few years.
Yeah.
Departed.
So, when I was about 20, I graduated when I was 22 and started a business 5 months after I graduated.
Baller.
And then, that's just the beautiful thing about being 22 is I can freaking do this.
Even though it's so true.
I went to art school. I could start a business.
I'm smarter than all the people.
I gotta, Yeah, I went to art school. I could do business. What had happened is that I was in a really just a very narrow place in my life, and I hadn't dealt with any grief stuff from my mom, and I wasn't curious about the world. I didn't care to travel. My world was just getting narrow, and it was essentially all of that. It was anything that I could control, and so I didn't want to read books. I didn't want to know anything about the world. It was essentially just really narrow, and it was very defensive in terms of avoiding conversations and anything that might be kind of vulnerable. And I was vulnerable. I was in a relationship with a girl I loved, and we moved in together. And then she decided, she wasn't ready to settle down. She had other things she wanted to do, and she moved away. And the intent was like, oh, she'll move back. We're going to move back and continue our life together. Well, that didn't happen. And so all the abandonment stuff and everything I just went down the shitter. And it was pretty bad. I mean, I lost like 30 pounds. I couldn't eat. There was a period there where I couldn't leave the house for a few weeks. And I just, it's easy to just kind of brush off now, but it was a really tough time.
Yeah.
Fast forward, moving out of that phase, I was really curious, like, what the hell just happened to me? What did I just go through?
And it wasn't like, let me go see a therapist.
I had a therapist in my life, but I felt like I was getting more of just a cognitive or an intellectual understanding of things. Mm-hmm. And then I went through this big, huge emotional thing. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was like, what was that? What, and still going through it. Like I'd still have these waves of things that I was experiencing, but I was just much more okay with experiencing those things because it was happening so regularly. Mm-hmm. But I was curious. And then I think that's where my friend, having friends like Glenn at the time, who was, 20 something years older than me. And he was into a lot more esoteric things and metaphysical things. He was into the fourth way and Gurdjieff and that kind of stuff, which I never really got into. But just I was volunteering as a Tai Chi instructor.
When that wove into
so all of that was happening.
Okay.
And so I was teaching Tai Chi to elderly women. At night.
But they loved you.
They were sweet.
They loved you.
And so I did have this split life. Like I was, it was really strange doing rock music and then elderly women and Tai Chi. And I was volunteering and I'd go to these places. And that teacher, Sean Dennison, I really enjoyed working with him. And he really embodied kind of this life of service thing. And very much of like, whatever praise you get, you can't own just as much as you can't own any of the, criticism you get. Yeah. So it was very this Taoism thing. And I appreciated his influence. And so I think I just started pulling on that string and reading books about Taoism, and then that led to Buddhism, and then, kind of all the Eastern mystical stuff. And was
Glenn into Buddhism at that time?
I don't remember. I don't think so. Okay. I don't think there was any real Buddhist conversations that we were having.
I was wondering did he bring it to you, or did you bring it to him, or did it just happen that you all both found it at the same time?
He probably was more familiar with it than I was at that time, but I don't remember us talking about it. Yeah, so I was just voraciously reading around that time and getting into the various kind of spokes on the different wheels, and they all had their own way, their own version of the way. And meditation was a concept that was showing up in those things. And but I don't think it was until I started getting into Ken Wilber's work again, where he kind of tied it together, how a meditation practice can help us, experience these states of awareness, but also help us move up in terms of stages of development and awareness.
Yeah. Stages of consciousness development.
Correct.
And before we go into that any further, I wanted to also acknowledge it seems to me, we've never talked about this, but it seems like you getting into that esoteric or meditation, Buddhist, Eastern philosophy stuff helped you with what sounded like, that early religious dogma that was like, it's either or, you're going to heaven or hell, because often the Buddhist stuff is like, you're in hell. Like you're already in it.
Welcome.
It's suffering. Yeah. Welcome to life. And so it, like, let's just work with these states of discomfort. So it seems like, and I'm imagining this, I'm checking it out to see if it's true, but I'm imagining that, like, it seems like that was a real relief to find some wisdom or someone talking about this sort of a theological orientation that isn't punitive, that isn't just you're going to go to hell if you don't say your prayers or do whatever, you know.
Yeah, and I always found Buddhism, I could appreciate Buddhism, but I never felt at home there. Like I never felt, it's so austere.
Well, that's
The Zen.
the Buddhism. I was
Zen.
going to say that's not all Buddhist, because Shambhala Buddhism is what I studied, and that's all heart.
Yeah, but there was definitely kind of missing, and also it was just a completely different culture, just from the Far East. So
Sure.
it was just, it always just felt out there, over there. It didn't feel like the world that I lived in with music and,
Your rebel flag and you're on your boogie board.
Kenny Powers.
Kenny Powers.
Okay. Again, I was interested. It still felt really intellectual to me, but I mean, it doesn't mean that I wasn't really curious about it. So I did appreciate that. But back to where did meditation fit in? So I think just,
So when you found Ken Wilber, back to, you were saying when you found Ken Wilber, that was when he really started weaving and helping you understand it's a trajectory of consciousness development.
I did. I saw it as a practice. And I think that that's when I started to really get that, oh, here was something that I could do. Here was something that I could try. And it could go in conjunction with the Tai Chi that I was doing or some of the other things. It was okay, I'm reading books, but I'm doing the service piece and I'm doing the kind of the physical practice piece of those kinds of things. But here was this other thing that could happen between our ears. And I was really curious about that. And that pulled me to it.
Okay. So you said you at the time when you got into it, you didn't know that there was a shadow side to it.
Yeah. And I think I probably read it. This is where I talk about people that are intellectual versus experiential. Like I was somebody that I think I read about meditation for a couple of years before I actually okay, I'm going to try this, really try this, really give it a go. I was one of those, I need to make sure I understand it correctly and how you do where you sit and how you sit. I wanted to make sure I could do it, quote, right. And so, that just kept me from actually doing it. And then I think I came across the Goenka stuff. I was actually searching around for it, and I think there was a book that was.
And when you say Goenka, what is that for people that don't know?
Goenka was a form of. It was a non-denominational version. If I remember this correctly, it's been a while, but if it's a non-denominational version of meditation practice. So you could be a Christian, or you could be a Hindu, you could be a Jew, you could be anybody, and still practice this in conjunction. There was not like if you practice this, then this is your religion or anything. It was just, here is a practice, and anybody can do it, and it's free to do.
If it helps you out, great.
Yeah, and it's free. If you want to come and do this thing, you can come to these retreats. And so I had heard about that. I read the little book. I can't remember the name of the little book. And so I signed up for a retreat, a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
And so that was Vipassana style
That was
retreat,
Vipassana.
which just briefly describe for people that have no idea these words.
Yeah, Vipassana is roughly a form of mindfulness, but you're essentially scanning the body as a way to be more present in the body. So it's much more of, instead of meditation can really be in your head and you're watching thoughts, this is about really focusing in on what am I experiencing in my body in real time, and essentially doing these scans of the body, which can be fascinating
Because it's always changing if you really pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, one experience I had, and we'll come back, but the one experience I had was like I really thought my knee was going to come out of my skin. I was in so much pain sitting.
And you for context again, you're talking about you're sitting still for 10 days. You're not moving. You're sitting in the same position. You've never sat in this position necessarily.
Yeah, you get breaks.
So you're talking about the pain of sitting still in that position.
It sucked.
And it's tough. And it was tough even for me. And I was in my 20s. I was, okay to do a lot of things to my body at that point, which would be really tough. Now, anybody just watching, like my brain screaming at me, your kneecap's going to come out of your skin if you don't move, and just staying with it, knowing that my kneecap's not going to come out of my skin, but hearing my brain just scream, and then just staying focused on it. And then where is the pain? What's the pain
the quality
actually?
of
Yeah,
the pain.
just really getting curious about it, not jetting out, not going somewhere else. And then it transmutes.
Yeah.
Something shifts. And I wish I could do that all the time.
Yeah.
But it's having an experience like that is really powerful. It's just like, not everything my brain tells me is true.
Yes. Yeah. Incidentally, this is for people with chronic pain. This is an excellent practice because
which has been more your world.
So easy to get into and it's so easy to get into to let your brain take over in that loop of like, this is just hurting me. But to be really present and really, really, literally quite present in relationship with the sensation. If you zero in on that sensation, it's ever changing. It might, the same feeling might come back to, as like for me, it's more of a throb, but like it might come back, but if you pay attention, it changes.
It's wild.
Really powerful. I remember learning that at when I went to Naropa and doing some of this practice there, and I was like, what? And they talked about how pain is really acute. It's short-lived. Suffering is sort of on and on and on, but pain is quick. And so I loved that teaching. And so that must have helped you. I mean, it seems like you went from being absolutely miserable when your girlfriend left and you realized she wasn't coming back, and all your stuff, unprocessed stuff about your abandonment with your mom and all of that came back, and wanting to you felt super miserable, but not really wanting to be with it, to being able to be with it in a sitting retreat.
Yeah, there was a surrender there. I was like, well, what else am I going to do? But by the time I was doing the meditation, I don't remember. I felt like I'd moved on. It was a few years on.
So you had already had some process and made peace and all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd moved on, and that was what had me move on is another whole story. But where I was when I started meditating. But I don't know where. I mean, I can describe going to the retreat or whatever, but I don't know what you want to hear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as long as I'd love to. I mean, I think it's beneficial for anybody that's curious about meditation for you to describe it. But my original question was, what drew you to this? What had you say yes to this? What has you say yes to it every single day for 20 years? Like, really? I mean, you still say yes to this, and it's not, you're like, Buddhism isn't my home. And so, it's like, it's not, it's useful to you in some way.
I think early on there was a bit of ego. I think I wanted to. There was a few things. I think I was genuinely interested in this spiritual growth, and I was drawn to that. There was definitely a spark to that. But I think that the rocket boosters were that there was a bit of ego, like, this will make me cool as fuck.
I thought it was. I didn't think it was, this will make me cool. I thought it was like,
there was
this is going to make
like,
me.
Yeah, sign
I'm
up
going to
for
be
this.
Exonerated from all the bullshit.
Then there's the shadow part, which is, I really.
That's not the shadow part.
Well, it's one of many shadows. I think there was the ego part because if my ego really wasn't on board, I don't think I would have done it. Like, if my self-image wasn't like, hey, this is going to make me look pretty cool.
Okay.
But that said, I didn't tell anybody I was doing this. So I don't know. Right. Maybe I'm being a little rough on myself there.
Yeah.
But I didn't tell people. I remember keeping it to myself that I was going to do this, and I didn't tell a lot of folks that I was going. And because it was weird. No one had ever heard of this. And in my world.
Right.
And so I mean, I think there was a part of the egoically, I liked the idea of developing into this spiritual version of myself. And maybe just for me, I liked that idea of being kind of, it seems like an asshole now, like those spiritual asshole types that kind of, I don't know.
New Age Wimp?
Not New Age Wimps, but just the like, I'm spiritual and I'm in touch with whatever. Maybe I was attracted to some like version of that. I don't know.
It's interesting. I mean, I think you're still being hard on yourself. I wonder if you're still being hard on yourself because I am, people don't do, you can experiment with meditation and learn meditation without going to a Vipassana retreat. You can learn how to meditate without doing things like that. So I wonder, I guess I'm wondering more like, it seems like there was a larger pull or call happening that didn't have to do with looking cool or didn't have to do with.
I think that there had to be some high amount of ego in there, else I wouldn't have done it. I think just knowing me at that time, I think there was just it was a component. It was a component of, hey, this jives with who I'd like to see myself become. Mm-hmm. However much of that was, I just want to own it. I just know that it had to be in the cards.
Okay.
And then I do think it didn't occur to me until much later, until I realized, I think I was at another retreat where
your knee didn't pop out of your chest.
Well, no, yeah, where it was another retreat where somebody was describing enlightenment, and then it was like, yeah, and then you do the laundry, and then you have another hell you go through, and then and I was like, I remember I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? You get through the enlightenment and then you have to go through more hell. Again? And I was just like, oh my God. And I remember I was like, screw this. I'm over it. I'm over the whole enlightenment thing. But yeah, it was an exoneration. I was seeking exoneration, and more like I never want to go through what I went through. I never want to experience that grief again. I never want to experience that loss of emotional control and being in that place of being terrified and hurt and whatever. And I didn't realize it at the time, but meditation seemed to ascribe to that. When I saw the image of monks and people that are so austere, it was like, oh, they've achieved this place where nothing gets to them. They're not impacted by life anymore. Right. I don't think I was really conscious of that, but there was a thing like, oh, if I get there, I don't have to feel this stuff anymore. I can outrun it or sidestep it, or I'll be so smart that it can't happen to me or something. There was some arrogant version. There was something in there. There was like, okay, cool. This is an escape. And, which is not true.
Right. Right.
But I think that was a large degree to why later on I became so disenfranchised with a lot of spiritual stuff, is because I went towards it with that in mind. Like I didn't realize it, but there was somebody in the room that was like, if we do this and we do this well, then life will be easier. I can't be hurt again. And then there was a fall. Yeah. When that, didn't come true, or I realized that was not going to come true.
For sure.
So.
Yeah.
But in terms of the funny stories that when I showed up at this meditation retreat, which was
the second one?
No, the first one. I didn't know anybody there, and this was when I was like, wow, what the hell have I gotten myself into? And I think I've told you this before. And I'm sitting there, kind of waiting for people to arrive, and I hear this Trippy Lanier, and everybody I grew up with called me Trippy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, this is just the wildest place. And it was an old friend. She'd been on this path, and she saw me there, and she was working on the staff.
Right?
Yeah. Awesome. That's
a great experience.
So it was great, but it was also this really weird, these worlds colliding. Here's my ancient past. It felt ancient, of growing up in a small rural town, and she's a part of that, and she's moved on from that, and now we're meeting here. It's just one of those wild, bizarre, kind of adding flavor to that. So yeah,
totally. That's great. How did you find yourself in your shadow side of things? Did you go into a shadowy depth there in
the first one
trajectory? No, in any of it, and just in the like, let's say the first 5 years of getting into.
Yeah, I think that I think there was a version of it that I lost the plot there for a while. I think I intellectualized a lot of this stuff, and it was something that I could grasp as an understanding between the ears. But I don't, looking back on it now, that there was so much to learn about actually integrating it and living it.
Like on the ground.
Yeah.
How does it look day to day in relationship?
And it didn't help that I was I'd gotten accepted into certain circles and I was able to hang out with some pretty extraordinary people. I'm actually hanging out and having drinks and being with people at the higher levels of things.
Yeah.
So it can be a mind fuck. And I think I started to believe, well, I must have some certain level of development if I get to be one of the cool kids. Mm-hmm. And, maybe I did have a certain level of development. It's just a mind fuck. It wasn't, I don't think I didn't deserve to think that I had accomplished something, and that wouldn't, if it inflated my ego, obviously it wasn't doing the right. It wasn't the right indication.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But it was really cool to have access to amazing people, amazing thinkers. It empowered me to start a podcast and be able to invite some amazing people onto the show and have access in that way. But it certainly wasn't an indication that I had developed some extraordinary level of spiritual development.
So what shifted? How'd you get here now? How did you get to your extraordinary level of spiritual development that you are?
I know enough now to know I don't know shit.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's kind of all been swept away. It feels like that.
I appreciate that. I have to pee.
You do? Okay, go pee. Yeah, I'll stop. Well, do you feel like we came to that was a little bit more than a pee break?
What do you want to say about that break? Is there anything you want to say?
I really enjoyed it.
I can't believe you want to come back to this recording after that.
Well, I want to make sure you feel
me.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure I feel what?
Expressed, like you got your curiosity.
I'm expressed.
Did we were talking about? There's no way I could keep this. This is too good.
You're such a you got such like.
I'm totally sharp right now.
All right, so we're mostly done with the conversation, but the original question that feels like there's still a little to answer here, which is why? Like, what brought you to it? Why did you do it? Why do you really what brings you back over all these years to do it? Initially, it was about self-image. Initially, it was about escaping, initially it was about escaping, and then it became it sounds like it was egoic and self-image stuff. So
there was that.
That was 20 years ago. Or 15 of the 20 years ago. So why keep going?
I've had some, experientially, like to strip away all of the stuff, the concepts and the ideas and the identities around meditation. I've had a few things. I've had some deep experiences in association with meditation.
What? What do you mean? I'm saying like what, for the listener who maybe has never ever meditated before too.
I had experiences, altered states that translated to a new way of seeing myself or a new way of experiencing things.
Okay.
But there's a sense of really being able to experience my body, or it's really more of it feels like an electrical field in my body. Mm. And it's such a heightened awareness of what's happening in my body that it's so hard to describe. This shit sounds so stupid as the words come out. But
I think it sounds great.
There's an awareness of my being that is beyond just kind of the normal day-to-day of being here like we are right now. Mm-hmm. And I think the first time I experienced that after I was coming out of it, I realized that's always happening. My brain is always perceiving that. That experience is always available to me. And I'm just not able to access it because I'm in the chatter and the other shit. So that was profound. There was also deep experiences I've had that when, let's say I'm in a really stormy place, it feels like a storm, an emotional storm. And instead of trying to transcend or get away from it, that experience by moving into it and having the experience, which is different than maybe being in therapy and having a cry or something, but actually experiencing it while also watching it, if that makes sense, that it shifts, it heals, or it transmutes. Something happens there. And I've had some experiences of deep peace. And the only way that I can experience, the only explanation or the only kind of analogy is in the way of like at the surface of the ocean, it can be very choppy and crazy. And as you go deeper down, it can be quite still. And so I could experience all of that at the same time in those deep states of meditation, that I could sense that there was all of this chaotic hurt or pain or suffering. And then I was also really in touch with the deep stillness and peace that was there. And that what that taught me was that the peace was not a result of something else externally. And that was very profound.
You need to buy a thing or do a certain climb a certain number of mountains or whatever to get there. It was always with you.
It's always there. And it's so hard to articulate this stuff, as I said, but knowing that really helps me as I go into the world, and that voice is there. It's like, well, if we only had this, or if you only that, if this was only different or whatever. And knowing that somewhere, if I could just sit down and shut up and quiet down and just listen and just be with it, that sense of peace was within me. It was already there.
And so once you've had those experiences, you realized, oh, wow, there's really something to this beyond escaping. This doesn't have anything to do with escape. This doesn't have anything to do with self-image. This actually, this is giving me something beyond all of that. Is that?
I mean, I could see why I would want to try to escape to those places. And I've met people that really just want to try to stay there and latch onto that. Those moments felt, I don't know if fleeting is the right word, but it's like they're there. They're just not easy to access. They take practice to their states. They're not stages. They're not, you're not there. You don't live there. But I think that the reason why I do it is that I like reminding myself of that. And there are times, even in just a 20-minute meditation, that I can drop in and I can really feel myself. If I really allow my nervous system to drop down, it's like everything can drop in for a second. And it's just more of a touch of, okay, right, slow down. And
yeah, but that touch is a full body attunement too. Body mind attunement. When even if it's just a touch, it's like shing.
Yeah,
I would think. I mean, that's how it is for me.
It's hard. It's hard to describe it. But it's enough of I don't feel like I'm chasing anything when I sit. I feel like it's on the list of things that is nourishing for me. And I may not always want to eat my nourishing foods.
Right.
I like the junk food.
Yeah.
But I know this nourishes me. And so I do have to be disciplined about it. It's not like, ooh, I can't wait. It's like, no, I know. I always feel better if I take 20 minutes to sit. Even just 20. Yeah. So, it's back to that what nourishes me question. And there's just a deeper knowing, like, yeah, I'm at my best, or I feel more grounded, more centered when I do that on a regular basis. And that I just want to add, like, that's also why it's bizarre to me when I see kind of the achiever version of the personal growth world that latches onto meditation. And I'm like, okay, cool. But they kind of go about it for their own reasons to be more effective, or like there's the achievers version of that. So I don't know what you would call my version, but the things that had me seek it. But I always feel like, oh man, you're missing the really good stuff.
Yeah. I'm noticing that if I were listening to this, or if I were sitting in a room with other folks listening to this conversation, I might have different questions that I would want answers to. And so I just feel curious if you would be open to having, if somebody listens to this and they want to ask a different question about whatever, would you be open to that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I wanted to do.
So are you saying they should email us the questions?
Oh yeah. That's a good idea. The
Or
magical way that they do that.
The
magical way that they send in
You might be able to
questions.
perceive that. Did you intentionally unbutton that?
Intentionally unbutton?
Unbutton? Wow. Okay.
No, I intentionally rebuttoned.
Okay. All right, I'll leave it at that. All right. So they should go to thenewmanpodcast.com or tripplanier.com and use a contact form and send in a question that way.
Okay. That's good.
We gotta give
Should there be
direction.
something in the subject heading, like more direction?
I think, no, that'll just come in. Whatever question you got.
Okay.
Or you can use telepathy to send it to Alyson.
Because I'm not checking my email.
Yeah, I know you're not checking your email.
I check my work email.
Or your phone. All right.
It's true. I'd be digital-less if I could.
If these interviews are helping you, please leave a positive review on whatever podcast app you use so that others can discover the show more easily.